Well, after Ty Thompson took some first-team quarterback reps, it sparked a lot of noise in the Oregon Ducks community about whether there's an open quarterback competition. So, is there a real, honest-to-goodness debate between Bo Nix and Ty Thompson in the minds of the coaching staff? We'll discuss today with Mike Black of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. We're talking all things signal callers here on Locked On Ducks. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single weekday. And you get plenty of me on here, which is why I like bringing on guests like my guy, Mike Black, host of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. Check him out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts as well. The man of big opinions and big predictions, some of which have come shockingly close to come true here on the show. So, Mike, we just couldn't keep you away for that much longer.
How you doing, Spencer? Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. So there's some quarterback controversy, or is there, right? Bo Nix comes in from Auburn. Ty Thompson is there. Jay Butterfield is in the room. I'm going to take a stab, knowing you the way I do, and imagine you're skeptical that Ty Thompson could actually be getting first-team reps here and have an open competition.
I'm skeptical Patrick Mahomes could win the competition. Bo Nix didn't travel 3,000 miles to not start. Especially considering the way that he's been talking about, oh, this is his last year for sure, and he's going to the draft. He's definitely not planning on not play. You're not talking about the draft if you're planning on. Come on, man. He's playing. They put Ty on that little first team, even though it had the running backs kind of mixed up and everything, and it was kind of odd. But that's just the smokescreen to make it seem like there is a true competition, when in all reality, it's going to be just like last year.
You think that this coaching staff would be that stubborn with it? Because, I understood it from a certain point of view with Anthony Brown of playing him, and he gives us the best chance to win. Ty's a true freshman, not ready yet. Okay, I understand all that. But once you got to the Alamo Bowl and you're down, what was it, 30-3 at the half, something like that, and the season has become what it was, and the holdovers that were there still didn't play Ty Thompson. Do you think that there's a coaching staff that's going to be that stubborn when it comes to just making even a temporary in-game quarterback change?
I mean, I don't think it's just that Oregon staff who is now at Miami. That's how a lot of staffs around the country work. If they have a guy, they're going to do their darndest to prove to you he's that guy. Stetson Bennett was not the best quarterback on Georgia's roster. I don't think anybody thought he was the best quarterback on their roster.
Worked out for him.
Yeah, they won the championship. They worked out for them because they had the talent to do so and to be able to just pretty much dominate most everybody they played. And we didn't have that talent, so they couldn't do that. But it's not just Mario Cristobal's staff that's like that. It's how college football works, especially with guys transferring to start. Guys don't transfer to sit. What's his name? Transferred to Utah. Yeah, he got benched, but guess what? He started week 1. He was terrible, but he started week 1. Anthony Brown transferred to Oregon, came here and ended up starting for a whole season. You got guys transferring to Boston College. They're starting week 1. You got guys transferring out of Florida to South Carolina, starting week 1. Spencer Rattler's transferring from Oklahoma to South Carolina. You think he's not going to start? Oh, he's going to start. These guys, these big name guys, yeah, if random, backup quarterback transfers, or for example, Robbie Ashford, maybe he won't start. He wasn't a huge name out of high school or out of transferring in the transfer portal. He was a name. People talked about him. A lot of it was Oregon fans and Auburn fans because Auburn fans expected they might be able to get him. But with these big names, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, obviously Caleb Williams, but that's completely different level. Right. All these names, these bigger names, they're going to play. They're not transferring to sit.
I agree with you on the bigger names part. And I mean, you put Anthony Brown's name in there, but remember, he didn't start right away either. He sat for a season while the staff gave Tyler Shuck the opportunity to start, and he was not able to claim the job, and Duck fans were clamoring for Anthony Brown. And then Anthony Brown was a starter. Then we're clamoring for Ty Thompson. So there's been that sort of interchange there for the Ducks. And I mean, I saw the quote the other day from Kenny Dillingham when he was asked, straight up, why did you bring in Bo Nix? And he says competition. And to me, that definitely does sound like coach speak, because you aren't typically bringing in a guy of that caliber, of that big a name, right? Coming from another Power 5 school in the SEC, where he's played 3 years of college football. He's already won games. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. It would seem strange to bring him in and not have him be the starter. So what would the scenario be? I know you don't think it's likely, and I don't either. I maybe think Ty has slightly more of a chance to prove himself, but let's say this is, a 1-year rental for Bo Nix, and he just wants to, show NFL scouts that he can stay healthy and that he can play at a high level, and just didn't have the supporting cast at Auburn, which is an entirely different conversation. But let's say that all of that takes place, and maybe Ty Thompson does beat him out. Like, what do you think would have to happen for Ty Thompson to actually be the starter?
The end of world hunger, world peace, and Ty Thompson to play like 2010 Cam Newton.
I think 2012 Marcus might do it.
Maybe. I think it's got to be 2010 Cam or 2019 Burrow.
It would have to be at a very high level. And based on what we saw this past season in limited action for Ty Thompson, he didn't show those sorts of traits. Doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback one day, but I think it's safe to say he's not that right now, and he's still trying to learn and grow. Now he's got a new system and such. So I know you don't think that there's an open quarterback competition there. I tend to think that it's not as open as the staff is perhaps letting on, but if you were let's make you Coach Black for a minute, which ironically enough is the name of my first ever basketball coach, Dennis Black. Shout out back at OES in Beaverton, Oregon. But let's say you are Coach Black for a minute, and you have these 3 scholarship quarterbacks in the room. Ty Thompson was a 5-star recruit. Bo Nix was a 5-star recruit, graded as a 3-star transfer. Jay Butterfield, pretty highly rated 4-star coming out. Would you want to see a truly open quarterback competition? Who do you think would emerge if it were truly open?
I would want to see an open competition. If I was a coach, I would have strongly suggested not bringing in Bo Nix. Now, I wouldn't have been against a transfer, period. I would have much rather had Thompson out of Texas or gone after Rattler out of South Carolina. I know there's issues with how people view him in the locker room, but if you could play, you could play. That's how football is. There's a reason Antonio Brown keeps getting chances to play in the NFL, because he could play. If you could play, you can play. And if you say you bring in a Rattler and you go and make a playoff game, does anybody care about what happened at Oklahoma now? No. You bring in Bo Nix and he starts here barely making a Pac-12 title game, maybe. But I would want there to be an open competition, and I do think Butterfield could win it. I am a big Ty fan. I would hope Ty wins it. He'd be the one I'd be pulling for, but I'm not 100% that either of them as of today are better than Jay Butterfield.
Yeah, I think that Butterfield's kind of the biggest enigma, right? I mean, I haven't even seen him throw a football before, and it's not as if he wasn't a pretty highly rated recruit coming out of high school as well, and he's got some mobility in there, and there's just he's the biggest mystery, I think, right? We have these little tiny snippets of, well, Ty Thompson, we saw him do this, and maybe he needs to work on that a little bit, but boy, the potential's certainly there. And I literally have you ever seen Jay Butterfield throw a football that's not on a high school tape?
Yeah, spring game last year.
Oh, you got me on that one.
And a few practice clips and stuff like that. But I think one of the main things is he's less flashy. He's not as good a runner as Robbie, and he doesn't have as strong an arm as Ty. He's in the middle. He's sort of kind of boring because of how in the middle he is, but he played against better high school competition than Ty did by far. And he's the most polished, and he seemed like from day one of the 3 freshmen we brought in, freshmen that we had at the time, that he was the most ready to play if one of them ended up playing. But obviously Ty has the most fan support, so whether coaches want to admit it or not, that plays a factor.
I want to ask you more about the Oregon quarterback room, but first I want to tell you all about Built Bar. We've all given up on our New Year's resolutions at this point, but Built Bars, they're more of a treat than a punishment, so to speak, when it comes to eating healthy. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein, which is way better for you than a candy bar, but it tastes just as good, maybe even better. They've got a bunch of great flavors as well. You know, I'm a mint brownie fan personally. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Last year's spring game, I think, was just so long ago, Mike, that I might, in my subconscious somewhere, have a memory of Jay Butterfield, and I just don't even remember. It was so many quarterbacks and so many plays ago, and
Threw a
it's
long
just
touchdown.
yeah, exactly. It's just it's a wild time out there. But now that the transfer portal is as hot as it is with the one-time free transfer rule, do you think that a coaching staff, and this Oregon coaching staff certainly sees Bo Nix differently, I would imagine it, than the high school guys who they didn't recruit and are just getting to know, whereas there's a little bit of past history there with Bo Nix. But do you think that, you know, on a broad scale, not even necessarily specific to Oregon, coaches are looking at transfer quarterbacks differently than high school ones? Because it seems like every time you bring in a transfer, there's more of an expectation he will start than a kid coming out of high school, even if he sat on your team behind a starter for a year or two.
Well, depends on what you mean by broad. Broad as in all of college football, or as in the ones trying to compete for playoffs and championships?
Let's go with the latter of those two categories.
So yeah, if you look at it, it's kind of Oregon is sort of the anomaly in this case. The guy who didn't transfer and played at Georgia, the guy who did, like, the non-transfer young players played at Alabama, the non-transfer young players were playing at Oklahoma, the non-transfer young players are playing at all these schools. The only recent transfers who have played at these schools are Jalen Hurts, who was a young starter at Alabama, or it's Caleb Williams is going to play for USC, who was a starter at Oklahoma, or it's Joe Burrow, who was a backup at Ohio State, won a freaking Heisman. So, like, yeah, transfers will play at these schools, but it's Bo Nix and Anthony Brown are not playing at these schools. Bo Nix and Anthony Brown are not transferring into these schools expecting to start with freshman 5-star Bryce Young on the team, or Spencer Rattler even being on Oklahoma. Neither of those guys would have started over there. Not even to mention Caleb Williams. We seem to be the only team of the teams who are looking to compete year in, year out that are starting these transfers every year. Ohio State's not starting transfers every year. Ohio State's starting the young players. Alabama's starting the young players. Georgia's starting their young homegrown guys. Oklahoma's starting the young guys. All those teams are winning and getting the playoff games. The one team who's not is sitting at home losing the Pac-12 title game.
So I think you make a lot of really interesting points in there, and you framed it in a way that I haven't totally thought about it before. The homegrown quarterback discussion, I understand why Duck fans are looking for it, right? And why you want that, because a guy's more likely to stay with the program for a couple years. And I think there's also sort of a feel, kind of that homegrown feel. It's different, right? I mean, Vernon Adams was really, really good for the Ducks. I love rooting for him, but it wasn't the same as when Herbert started as a freshman and then grew into a player who won a Rose Bowl his senior year, or when Marcus came in and started lining it up and got to a national championship, right? It doesn't have that same feel. Do you think that that's part of the reason that fans are so enamored with it? Like, you're making the X's and O's argument, and I totally see that. But do you think that fans who, you know, just want Ty Thompson to start no matter what, you think that's sort of part of it?
Yeah, wanting Ty to start no matter what is a little off basis, in my opinion. Like, that's not what you should be wanting. You should be wanting the better of the guys to play, obviously. But with the homegrown guys, you know, there's still argument of potential. With the transfer guys, they transferred for a reason. They didn't transfer because they were expected to do really great where they just were.
But Joe Burrow transferred for a reason too, and that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, Joe Burrow is an elite talent who didn't get a chance to play. These guys got a chance to play, especially the guys we brought in. Anthony Brown was losing his job to Phil Jerkovich. Bo Nix, it was 50-50 on whether he started this year or not. These guys weren't guaranteed to keep their starting jobs, and they weren't guaranteed to do great if they did. And so, those are the guys who are transferring. Like Spencer Rattler transferred because he wasn't going to play. Caleb Williams wouldn't have transferred if Lincoln stayed. So, I mean, guys are transferring because they're not able to play because they're not the best guy in the room they're already in, or not guaranteed to be the best guy in the room they're already in, and they don't want to take that risk. So they're transferring where they know they can play. But
yeah. So is your point essentially that whether it comes from a high school, because when Bo Nix came in and Oregon had, a number of fans are saying, "Oh my gosh, why are we doing this? This is terrible. Why do we want him?" Yada. And my point is like, I want whoever the best quarterback is going to be. I don't have a particular preference about whether or not it's a high school kid who started with the Ducks as a true freshman and then grew within the system and all that good stuff. I want whoever the best player is going to be. But your point, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, just to summarize, is that the sorts of transfers that Oregon has been bringing in has not justified putting them right into the starting slot and not giving the young guys a chance.
Yeah, and it hasn't justified risking losing a how am I blanking on this? A Robbie Ashford Auburn. There are opportunity costs with taking in these transfers. It's not just taking in a transfer and adding a guy to a room. It's taking in a transfer and risking losing another really talented guy who we haven't seen not play great yet, like we have with the quarterbacks we've taken lately. And it's, there's risk to that. And are they worth the risk? Probably not. There are guys who are worth the risk. Obviously, Caleb Williams. I think Rattler, on-field wise, purely on-field, would have been worth the risk. Bo Nix is not one of the guys who are worth the risk. Rattler, struggled, but he showed a lot more flashes than Bo did even in this 2019 season.
I think that I'd probably agree with you there because I never saw Nix as a guy who could go top 5 in the NFL draft. One time I saw Rattler's but he has fallen off of cliff. Without going into too many details, I'll just say I have it on authority from people who have known Spencer Rattler that he is not good in the locker room. And I can deal with that if you're maybe a running back or a DB or a receiver or someone, but when you're the quarterback, if you're not well liked in the locker room, and Rattler, from what I know from someone who knew him while he was at Oklahoma, he was not. That was my biggest concern in that pursuit.
But sometimes there are quarterbacks who are really good who aren't well liked too, though. I mean, you got guys like, now I don't believe this to be the case, but you have guys like Aaron Rodgers who people want you to believe are not liked in their locker room. You have the really hard edged, they're like, they seem really quiet, reserved. They don't want to talk to anybody. Now, I know there was other instances with Rattler that we all saw in QB1 or that people had rumored about the locker room. But also you got to take into account he was on QB1. He was a really high-rated player. So some things are going to get exaggerated because people will be like, oh, I'll get attention if I say this. The same stuff happened with anything that went on, like some controversy when the GM for the Bulls left after Michael Jordan and him had a falling out. Well, now everybody's talking about the issues they had with this GM. They weren't saying that before, but now that something came on and this is the big thing being talked about, everyone piles on top of that.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair point to consider. Another fair thing for all you Duck fans to consider. Oh, I was actually about to transition into the live read there, but that's okay.
My bad.
This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Save time and money when using a Rock Auto. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their reliably low prices are there for every consumer, and they've got everything you need for your car. Brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet if you need that. Mike's been having some leaks in his buildings lately and the properties he owns. So hopefully he's not having a leak in his car. And if he needed new carpet, he'd go to Rock Auto. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked on in their How Did You Hear Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So you gotta sneak those in sometimes. You can't be totally predictable. You gotta keep the audience on their toes. I don't want you to know what I'm about to say next, but the next thing I want to ask you, Mike, is so let's look at the Oregon roster as it is right now in transfer portal and depth chart changes as spring football goes along. A number of things could change between now and I believe September. What is it? 4th, 3rd? When what is it?
3rd,
yeah, my birthday, when we go down to Atlanta to play the Georgia Bulldogs. Number of things could change, but let's just look at the roster as we know it right now. And there's some injuries at spring practice, so not everybody is there. It's not a fully healthy Oregon team just yet. But if the Ducks are going to get back to the Pac-12 championship game, which I think is a reasonable goal, looking at the way the roster is currently constructed, even for a first-year coaching staff, I think they will be the overwhelming favorites in the Pac-12 North. I don't know who would be a major challenger, right? It doesn't mean that a Washington State or a Washington couldn't couldn't pop with their first year head coaches. The Washington State guy was there last year and whatnot as the interim coach, but his first full season, I should say. Maybe Oregon State sneaks in the conversation, but Oregon probably will be the favorites. But if the Ducks are going to get there, you probably need to win about 10 games again prior to the Pac-12 championship game, or at least you would assume it would be 9 or 10. What do you think the Ducks need from their quarterback in order to be at that level with the way you see the roster right now?
You just need to be competent in your decision making, not only in passing plays, but in these option plays. Like, we could have been very successful, and we were at times with Anthony Brown when he made the correct decisions in the option. But there were other times, Stanford, where he did not make the correct decision in the option, and that really cost us in the long run. So it's really a big factor in that. It's just decision making. And we have the running backs to rely on them and just win by running the ball. Sean Dollars and Byron Cardwell Jr. are both really solid players, and you could rely on them. You could lean on them to win you games. Now, I am not of the ceiling mindset that a lot of Duck fans are. I think our ceiling is 10-2 and more likely is 9-3. But you just rely on the running game. You're going to most likely win the North by default more than anything.
I don't think it'll be that easy to win the North. I mean,
Stanford, I think, is the biggest challenger, and I know they were really bad last year.
They were pretty bad.
They're Stanford.
Well, yeah, but they haven't felt the same in the last few years. I'm always worried about Oregon playing Stanford. I don't know that I'm worried about Oregon contending for the North with Stanford.
Watch out.
I guess we'll find out. They did bring in a highly rated recruiting class this year, didn't they? Was it 12th? 11th? Yeah, 11th or 12th. That was one of the most unexpected things of the recruiting cycle. I would say that is not something I saw coming. But David Shaw is a pretty well respected football coach. So
that endowment hit different. Now I'm going to make one note, and then we can continue with what you were talking. If Stanford ever decided to truly care about football with how everything is driven now in the NIL, it just other schools would not stand as much of a chance as they really think they will. Stanford and the other Ivy Leagues, for example, their endowments could swallow most of college football's endowments. And if they chose and their boosters got behind them and they really got invested in these athletic programs, there's nothing you can do. So if the minute Stanford's always going to be just like we talked about USC was before they got Lincoln. They're a sleeping giant. Stanford is a perennial sleeping giant because they haven't really broke through in the modern era and done anything super great besides the Andrew Luck years or the Christian McCaffrey years or the Love years. But
those are some pretty good years, man.
They could turn that switch any minute and be competing for titles if they really wanted to.
They do have strict academic standards, though. I mean,
so does Notre Dame.
Yes, that is true, but I would argue it's harder. It's a lot harder for Notre Dame to be at that level. I agree that Stanford is capable of doing that. I mean, we've seen it. The eras that you mentioned, right, with McCaffrey and Luck. Luck and McCaffrey were never together, right? That was too far apart.
I think McCaffrey might have been a freshman and didn't.
Yeah,
play.
But he was not the Christian McCaffrey that we came to know as a dominant player in college football. Yeah. So, I mean, we've seen Stanford compete at that level. I mean, it's great for Stanford that they've got a good recruiting class. I just think they probably need another year or maybe even two to let them set in and fully develop. But I agree Oregon should be the favorites, and I don't think that this is a year where Oregon will compete for the college football playoff. I mean, I would actually agree with you 100% that the ceiling's probably 9-3, 10-2, depending on how the quarterback play. You just have so much
10-2 if you get lucky.
New stuff. What's that?
10-2 if you get lucky and beat one of the two teams.
I mean, probably going to lose to Georgia in the opener. And you just look at the roster. There's a lot of good things there for a first-year head coach to have, like the offensive line and big playmakers on the defensive side of the ball, like Justin Flo, Noah Sewell, and Jeffrey Bossa. But the secondary is undergoing a lot of turnover. I have questions about the pass rush. The offensive line will be really good. Skill position guys, I think, are pretty solid. Quarterback play, you don't know. You got a first-time full-time play caller in Kenny Dillingham with a first-time head coach. Like, there's going to be some bumps this year, but I do think that would I expect Oregon to at least be a major player in the North and probably win it? Yeah, I do, just based on the talent they've got coming back from last year's team. But I don't, like you said, they could sleepwalk to it. I don't think that they could do that.
I'm not saying they could sleepwalk to it. I'm saying the rest of the North is bad enough where you can mess up and still win the North, most likely this year. Oregon State has been doing really good. They still don't have near enough talent to win the North unless they play excellent throughout the entire season. Washington, I don't expect to compete at all. They're going to be worse than they were last year. They might win another game, but they're as a team, they're going to be worse than they were last year. They're
Yeah,
probably going to play Dylan Morris again.
they're in rebuild mode. Yeah, I can't believe that Dylan Morris is their starting
Wazoo
quarterback.
lost Delora. Not worried about them. Stanford has talent. They're always talented. That's the only reason I'm concerned about them. Who else is in the North? Like
Cal.
It's exactly. And it's not saying that Oregon's so good they could sleepwalk to it. No, the North went from really good to really bad. That's why we can sleepwalk to it.
I think Oregon will be the favorites, but it'll just depend on how everything gels together, because you just have a lot of change, a lot of turnover, a lot of moving parts that have to gel. So we've been talking a lot about quarterbacks here on the show, and the last thing I'll ask you, and for those of you listening, this is Mike Black of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. Check him out wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as well. The Ducks didn't get a quarterback recruit in the class of 2022, unless you count Bo Nix as a transfer, but Ty Thompson, Jay Butterfield there. Bo Nix probably going to be a one-year rental, and then he will perhaps try to go to the NFL. At least that's kind of what the word out on him is. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining should he desire to use them both. But does Oregon need to make going after a high-caliber quarterback recruit in the class of 2023 a top priority, do you think?
Yes, and they have tried and failed, and they are going to try and fail again. In their pursuit of Nico Amavailea, he was Dillingham, was pushing for Nico really hard and was giving a really good effort to get Nico. Obviously, we missed out on that. But in doing so for Nico, it's sort of a repeat of how everything went with DJU and CJ Stroud. They neglected to recruit the other quarterbacks. The other quarterbacks felt kind of slighted and disrespected, and it's causing a lot of issues in regards to being able to land those commits. Jaden Rashada seemed like if you wanted him, he could very easily become a Duck. Now Jaden Rashada looks like it's Miami, then Ole Miss, then Oregon. And it's going to be the same. I've talked to 2024
California kid, though. That helps.
That makes it even worse that you slighted him. He's close to you, and Miami's been pushing him the whole time, but you ignored him.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying that in the last few years, there's another highly rated uncommitted recruit in the class of 2023 at the quarterback position. I forget his name, but he's from the state of Michigan, and I'm just saying that Oregon has had a better time recruiting kids out of the state of California than someone in the middle of the country or Florida or Texas or a place like that.
Did they? Where's Bryce Young playing? Where's CJ Stroud playing? Where's DJ Uyunglele playing?
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, if I were going after a recruit and I had to choose between him being in California or him being in, and you got to remember, this is also a different staff than the one who did not get a Bryce Young or a DJ. But if I'm going after a recruit who's in California or Texas or Michigan, I'm going to give the Ducks a better chance if he's West Coast based, because it's more likely that he's grown up and at least had some semblance of awareness about Oregon football.
In 2018, I would have agreed with you, but with the recent trends, there's been no trends showing that the top prospect out west is going to Oregon or USC. The top guys out west have been going east for 3, 4, 5 years now.
Malachi Nelson's going to USC, so the Trojans are not going to be in
on
where would he have,
where was Caleb Williams going before Lincoln Riley got to USC? Oklahoma, where Lincoln Riley was. Lincoln Riley's going to help USC keep them. Lincoln Riley's not at Oregon.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, talking about Rashada specifically, is he's class of 2023. He's from the state of California, and yes, Lincoln Riley is a big draw for quarterbacks because all he does is send starters to the NFL. But USC's gotten Malachi Nelson, so Jaden Rashada is not going to go to USC. He's not going to go compete with Malachi Nelson. That's my point.
Yeah, my point was that before Lincoln Riley got to USC, quarterbacks, the top option, were not going to Oregon or USC. They weren't going. We got Ty. Ty was a 5-star, but he was not everyone's top option out west. He was a really good recruit, highly regarded recruit, but he wasn't the number one out west. And we pushed for those number ones. We were pushing for all of those number ones. We were pushing for those number twos. Whiff. Because they're going where guys, they know this offense has been playing really well. They know this offense has recently been producing quarterbacks and making those quarterbacks look good. Yes, Herbert's playing great, But now everyone's asking, why the hell did he not look this good at Oregon?
Yeah, and I mean, that was the point that I was going to make is the offensive staff, I think, can do a better job than the previous one of highlighting a quarterback's skills and ability to get, because there were people who literally said Justin Herbert was not a first-round quarterback. Smart guy. I was shocked that Joel Klatt said that.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, but there were a number of people that said, I don't know about Herbert. We're all sitting here going, man, he's just we're holding him back down here offensively with the scheme. And so I think that the next staff has an opportunity to elevate Oregon's brand in that sense.
Yeah. So for anybody who listened this long, a little inside information. It's not looking good. When you have 2024 top 247 quarterbacks saying that the offense seems behind what everybody else they visited is doing, including G5 programs, that's not a good sign. When those same quarterbacks or some of the other quarterbacks that Oregon's been pursuing were saying they were pretty much ignored for their entire trip and had to talk to the defensive coordinator because the offensive coordinator barely recognized them, that's not a good sign. I mean, Spencer, you can vouch. You've seen these messages as well.
It's not
great.
It's not what you would necessarily love to see. I think that it's still so. I mean, the staff hasn't even coached a game, right? And like, is it news you necessarily want to hear? No. Is it a death sentence at this point? I think before you have an on-field product to actually compare it to, it's too early to put the final nail in the coffin in that sense. But I can't confirm what you were sending me and who they were coming from. We're not going to name names and such, but there is it does give me pause.
Yeah, and do you think it's going to be much better after they watch Bo Nix go out there, scramble out of the pocket with a clean pocket?
It depends. Maybe he just didn't trust the last offensive line. Maybe he'll learn to trust this one. I don't know, but I certainly hope that he's able to stay in the pocket, because watching Anthony Brown break the pocket when it was clean and not give the play a chance to develop was definitely frustrating. So if we start to see that sort of stuff, then it'll be like deja vu for Duck fans. But
I got a last comment too, because I know the talent around him argument is really huge. Auburn is top 15 in talent composite. They are not trash.
Well,
the
their
Twitter
skill position
consensus
guys,
is
their
that they
skill
were
position
terrible.
guys were definitely there and comparable, maybe even slightly better than Oregon's in some sense. Their offensive line was not. You talk to our Auburn
Their
fans, they
offensive
will
line
tell
was
you the
better
offensive
than
line
most they
was not.
played. It was better than most of the defensive lines they played. Not Alabama and Georgia, obviously, but most of the teams they played had a worse defensive line than they had an offensive line.
But that's also something you have to consider, is now he's coming to the Pac-12, which we all know is not as high level as the SEC, and so things might not seem as fast or as challenging for him playing in this conference. And I think that he will have a good chance to show that.
I don't know, man. A lot of the best quarterbacks until Bryce Youngs of the world started going to these SEC teams were coming out of the Pac-12, and it's not just that. JT Daniels was looking really good at Georgia before he got hurt. He struggled in the Pac-12 and lost his job in the Pac-12 after getting hurt. It's not easier for quarterbacks to play. The linebacker play, I'd argue, in the Pac-12 has been better of late than it has been in the SEC.
Linebacker play has been very good. You have like Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Devin Lloyd of Utah.
Eddie Ulofaccio, I can't pronounce his name at all. Really good player. ZTF sometimes stands up. KT sometimes stood up. Like there's elite linebackers around here, and they're going to rush that quarterback. And when they know you have a quarterback who willingly leaves the pocket, they're going to send that guy after him. It's not as if he would have moved to the Pac-12 6 years ago, I would have agreed. But with how the linebackers have been of late, I think he's gonna look even worse.
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. But a dose of
3rd.
realism and strong opinions from Mike Black of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. As always, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate everybody listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.